think that's a
This was a
misconception.
magical coincidence for prosecutors that she went on
Right.
Housewives flaunting her lifestyle. They allege this conspiracy for 2012. Look, as a district attorney, I tried all kinds of cases. My favorite were financial crimes. Every time there was some kind of a paper case, people brought it to me and they're like, Emily, you love this shit. I'm like, I am nosy as hell. So you give me a case where I get all your social media accounts, your bank records, and everything you've been up to. And I'm going to sit there with highlighters and color code it till the cows come home and find everything in your life, including if you're in custody and your girlfriend's still paying for Match.com with your bank account while you're sitting in jail. I'm going to tell you about it. So I love this stuff. And this has been going on since 2012. I'm sure by 2019, she thought that she was free on this. I think speculation, because a lot of fraud defendants have a very magical way of thinking that what they're doing is not criminal. It's just so clever that everyone else in the world doesn't get it. They are the best business people in the world, and the rest of you just don't understand. I think she had convinced herself that what she was doing was legitimate work and that everyone else just didn't get it because she's so smart. And that's why she ended up on TV. That arrogance just pulled right through for us.
That's what I was gonna say. So like because it also said like 2012 or 14 to 2021. So like she must have
Mhm.
been doing something, right? Even though they were caught.
Yes, on the wire fraud case, the telemarketing scheme, they're alleging that that continued on until March 2021. It was just the money laundering part that they allege stopped in 2019. And I don't know if that's because the sales floor got raided, because it's alleged that the sales floor individuals, the 9 defendants from 2019, were the ones that were putting money into the offshore accounts that were controlled by Jen Shah and Stuart Smith. So they when the money
That
stops
makes
going into the
sense.
accounts, you know that something's up. There's been a hiccup and you're going to figure out why.
And you think, because the other school, it's like you said, both really, like, is it possible that she stopped this, but then the arrogance is like, I'm on Housewives and I've not, I see what you're saying, the drinking. I mean, that's a good point. The drinking, she might, this is coming, but could it just be the arrogance of like, okay, so no one's calm. I stopped.
Uh-huh.
I let's just quiet everyone. I'm going to
Mhm.
be on national TV and be famous, but I'm
Right.
not doing this anymore. And like, it's good. Life is great.
And I'm going to be on national TV and famous showing how much money I make from these other businesses because I'm the best businesswoman in the world. There were times watching this season that I felt like she was Unikitty sitting there going, business, 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 business. I do business because it's businessy with my business. And I'm like, girl, you're not actually saying words. What are you talking about?
I'm like,
And now
what
we know why.
business? So I mean, there is a chance that she just, like arrogantly is like, I got away with this, and like, let's just shush and hush and move on.
Oh, that's why I loved fraud defendants because they're like, "What do you mean money laundering? I'm just a great business person. You wouldn't understand it, district attorney. It's not illegal." I'm like, "Actually, the prison sentence and jury conviction says that it is." But there's a very interesting profile to white collar crime defendants, and arrogance is one of the key factors in that. Especially there's normally these little bits and frauds tend to grow. And I think the same thing with Tom Girardi, by the way. There probably was an incident where money didn't cover somewhere because of something. And then it was like, oh, the state bar didn't come down on my head. The world hasn't ended. Oh, we cool. This is how I'm running my bank now. This is great. And then it builds and it builds and it builds until eventually it comes crashing down.
Right. And I've heard, I mean, I've knew that about like the defendants too. Like that is what it is. It's the arrogance and like you, I mean, I've been told like the lawyer was going to have to probably beat her over the head to get her to understand, like, you need to plea, like, just, you're not right. Like to get like a defendant.
Her legal team is going to have quite
Yeah.
the conversation. It was very interesting listening to the arraignment today to
So
hear
what
the
happened to
way
that?
the judge had very different interactions with the two different legal teams. Um, Very much praised Stuart Smith's lawyer. Stuart was painted by his attorney as He's just a humble guy from Utah. He's very deeply rooted with the community. He's got a wife and kids. And the judge softened towards that and said, we can have his wife be the signer on his bond and have his house put up as collateral. The government was very patient with it. But when it came to Jen Shah, what we heard was she's not forthcoming in her financial documents that she needed to give to pretrial services. She's listed her income as zero. She's a flight risk. The state the state said, well, we don't know how long she'll be a public figure for, so that her face being recognizable isn't enough to say that she's not a flight risk before she got issued that $1 million bond plus $250,000 in cash or collateral and 2 signers on it, which means 2 individuals are going to have to show up, be interviewed by the U.S. Attorney's Office, and prove that they are good for the money if she doesn't come to court. So there's quite a lot hanging over her head to make her show up. The AUSA said that she and Stuart Smith are the top of this scheme,
Oh, they
which
are? Okay.
I was
Wow.
shocked
I'm
when she said that in
shocked.
court.
I'm
I was
shocked.
shocked. So the AUSA said they're at the very top of this scheme, that they had multiple shell companies under their control, that just one of those shell companies was moving $5 million since 2017, that there had been substantial cash withdrawals recently from those companies, that they believe she has access to a lot of the criminal proceeds, or the dirty money as it is, from this scheme in cash elsewhere, that she doesn't own any property in her name, also shooketh with that.
That
And
house is rented.
they said she has
Joshua.
no property in her name, like not even another house, no property in her name. Now, it could be that she kept everything in her husband's name because she knew this was going on. It could be that there's stuff buried under businesses, but she would have to disclose that on her financial documents that came. We also learned that her house was thoroughly searched the day she was arrested. Financial documents were taken, that one of the companies had their debit cards for this company that's not in her name, that was the one that was moving the $5 million. We also heard from the AUSA that she was a substantial flight risk because this case carries so much jail time. And that was really the first time we've heard the AUSA with a little edge in her voice saying, this shit is serious. It carries a lot of jail time. And the side of that, the kind of read into that was, and I don't think she's taking it seriously.
I don't think she's taking it seriously. Is this bond bail, like the million plus the 250 in the 2 signers, is that like so egregious? Like, is that way above what it should be?
No, I think that's average. I think that's average for this kind of case. The AUSA is the only one at this point that knows how much money we're talking about in these frauds, but she shared that one of the companies was moving $5 million. It's very clear that there are other companies. In the underlying indictment, there's like 20 bank accounts listed from different companies. So if each of those is moving $5 million, we're talking tens of millions of dollars potentially in fraud proceeds, and that'll be very interesting to see.
As you say, I'm most shooketh about the fact that she's at the top of it, because I was convinced that she was part of it and not even anywhere near the top. That was my
right.
Like, we wouldn't be talking about this if she wasn't on Housewives. She was like, here are some people, and she might be not as low level as those 10, but a little bit above it. I thought this was 12 steps until her. So
I was very, very surprised by that information. And I was sitting, listening to the call through all the attorneys that couldn't figure out how to mute their microphones and all of it. And when first of all, I was very surprised that her attorneys were fighting the bond, because it's not uncommon to have a bond this size in a criminal fraud ring. They have access to cash. That's part of the crime that's alleged. Right. But when her attorney started fighting it, it opened the door for the AUSA to say on this call, knowing that reporters, and the public and myself are all sitting there listening in. And the AUSA was like, well, actually, let me tell you what. She and, Smith are at the very top of this ring. This is the money they're moving. This is what they're doing. I was like, bring us the tea. Thank you. Thank you for
That's
sharing it. Her attorneys opened the door for that. And then when we get to Stuart Smith's attorney, he's like, we understand the $1 million bond. Can we just talk about these two things? He's a married guy, deeply rooted in the community. Can we work it out? And the court was like, oh, thank you. Thank you for your patience. And was so happy to work with Smith's attorney, where you could feel the kind of frustration in the judge's voice with Jen Shah's attorney, because one of them stepped in it in court, to be perfectly frank, and said, I don't know what the government means by wanting two, financially stable adults. And the judge is like, do you practice in this district? Which, ouch, Judge Shade. And the
Judge
attorney's like, yes,
Shade.
Judge Shade, do you practice in this district? And the attorney's like, yes, I've been practicing for 40 years. And the judge goes, well, then you should be aware that it is the regular practice of this court that a financially responsible adult will turn themselves over for interview. And the judge listed it out. And I was like, oh, you never should have asked that question. The judge was so annoyed with that attorney.